I purchased the TONEX Pedal almost a year ago with my own money, and I've been using it on a daily basis since then. Is this really the poor man's Kemper, or is it something else entirely? Stick around and let's find out. Guys, before we get into the video, please like and subscribe. I'm at 72 subscribers at the time of recording. The question is, can we get to 100? With your help, I'm sure we can, so please hit that subscribe button and let's get back to TONEX. TONEX came out originally in the beginning of 2023, so almost 3 years by now. When I first heard about it and realized it was an IK Multimedia product, my instinctive reaction was kinda lukewarm. Not because there's anything wrong with IK Multimedia, but because they're not really well known for high-quality guitar products, at least from the perspective of studio-grade tones. Much to my surprise, after trying just a few amp models from the free version, it became very clear that this was a new type of product. This was the first time I played a guitar plugin that sounded and felt close to an actual amp. For years I tried every plugin in the market, and while it was plausible to use them for most applications, even full mixes, none of the offerings ever felt right to me personally. They mostly sounded dull and uninspired when compared to the high-end modelers, especially the XFX. But for some reason this sounded different from the very beginning. I think it's important to clarify that TONEX is different from everything else that's currently in the market. Unlike amp modeling units like the Boss GT1000 or the XFX, TONEX is more akin to Kemper, in the sense that the technology it uses is amp capturing and not amp modeling. What that means is that in the case of modeling, companies like Fractal and Line 6 build fully functional models of each amp, including the functionality of each knob and each button. This results in a model that not only tries to replicate the sound characteristics of the original amp, but also its functionality. The other method is the amp capturing methodology, which was first popularized by Kemper. It's the idea of taking a snapshot of an amp's current state and turning it into a playable amp model. The big difference is that these amp captures we see in Kemper, TONEX and Quad Cortex, among others, are generally more realistic than traditional amp modeling, but they lack a lot of functionality. You basically need a capture for each state of the amp, meaning clean channels, rhythm channels and lead channels will each require its own capture. Unlike amp modeling, where one model can do everything. And just a side note, while in my opinion amp captures generally sound better than amp modeling, this is not a rule and it's not set in stone. The XFX continues to be to this day the best sounding digital guitar processor I've ever tried, and it's based on amp modeling, although I think they've come out with some sort of capture technology. But at least traditionally, Fractal does amp modeling, and their units sound the best, at least to my ears. TONEX is more like a software suite of amps, cabs and effects, more than it's a physical product. The idea is that TONEX exists in your computer in software format, and you can use all of its parts in your PC in standalone mode or inside the DAW as a plugin. But then you can also use it directly from the TONEX Pedal. However, if you want to add your presets or download new amp models from the ToneNet community, you will need to use a computer. In theory, you can use TONEX Pedal completely offline and never connect it to a computer, but you'll be limited by what it ships from the factory with, and you'll need to adjust the parameters on the unit's very limited and honestly quite sucky controls. So to anyone interested in TONEX Pedal, I must insist that this unit absolutely works closest to as intended when you use it alongside the computer. So if we compare TONEX to other units from a functionality aspect, we can see TONEX is totally unique in its offerings. TONEX is the only product that offers a plugin version that's totally integrated with its hardware companion and can be used interchangeably. If we think about Helix, it does have Helix Native, the plugin version, but there's really no interaction between the two platforms. Native is a platform and the pedal board is a separate platform, no interaction between them. Kemper and Fractal both offer their products in multiple form factors, but no plugin version of either. Neural DSP has the Quad Cortex and the plugins also as separate platforms, much like Line 6. And while they've started to integrate the plugins into the Cortex, it's not exactly the same as TONEX. TONEX is the only product where you can have exactly the same sounds on the plugin as you have on the pedal. And the computer app pretty much works as a hub for all your TONEX sounds, which you can then sync to your pedal. It sort of reminds me of the relationship between iTunes and the iPod. You first get your library to where you want it, and then you sync the player to the library. TONEX kinda works like that, and it's a super unique place in the market that currently no one else is going for. And to me, that's an awesome proposition from IK Multimedia. So a couple years after release, how does it sound? IK Multimedia released version 2 of TONEX tone models a while ago, and it introduced new features to the amp capturing process. It now captures amps more quickly and in a slightly more realistic manner. I've tried the new factory presets that IK Multimedia added to my library, and I like them a lot. I can say that TONEX V2 sounds exceptionally better than V1, especially because I don't have any tube amps to capture myself, so I can't say it sounds any different. But the factory presets definitely sound better than the V1 presets, that's for sure. Now, generally speaking, TONEX as a plugin has really destroyed my expectations of what is possible for a plugin to sound like. I've been using guitar plugins for over 15 years, and I tried all of them. TONEX has been the first time where I've truly felt like a plugin is sounding as good as an external processor. Since the XFX and the Kemper came out, I've accepted the reality that tube amps are no longer a necessity and digital processors can get us 95% of the way there. And while a tube amp, mic'd up in a nice room with a nice mic, can still be a great asset, for most of us, a digital processor is a more realistic and affordable solution. But plugins have not yet reached the same level of fidelity and realism that external processors have. Perhaps they never will, at least when we're talking about the most expensive and realistic sounding offerings like the XFX. However, TONEX does take a huge leap forward. When I started using TONEX on a daily basis, I realized how much more realistic it sounds than every other plugin out there. I don't exactly understand why it sounds better than the others, but it does. IK Multimedia has included effects in the TONEX suite since the beginning, but recently, I think early this year if I'm not mistaken, they updated the app to include new effects, specifically modulations and delays. And in general, I'm happy to report that all the TONEX effects are very good. The reverbs and the delays sound great. There's not a lot of choice, so don't expect Strymon levels of reverb and delay variety, but what is there sounds very professional and leaves nothing to be desired, even compared to the best in the business. The same applies to the modulation and the compressor, with the only problem here being the lack of variety in the effects. So if you compare the effects here to the ones on the Helix or the GT1000, TONEX effects don't have the same amount of variation and types of effects, not even close. But much to my surprise, I think I like the TONEX effects even more than the Boss ones, which trust me is a big surprise for me. I never expected to like the effects suite on TONEX as much as I do. I think IK Multimedia understood that the guitar community was looking at them after they released TONEX, and they used this opportunity to show us just how good their team can be at doing effects. Nevertheless, I still think adding a couple of effects pedals to a pedal board with TONEX, or even adding something like an Ajax Stomp or a GT1000 core, can really help with effect variety. When it comes to build quality, the pedal is not a great build. I just reviewed the GT1000 core recently, and that unit is put together so well that in comparison the TONEX pedal feels very plasticky and cheap. I've owned a couple of pedals in this price range, like the OCD and the Sir Riot, and these pedals were a lot nicer than the TONEX. Sure, those pedals don't come with a software suite, but I still think the difference is very significant. I think this is absolutely the worst part about TONEX. The pedal feels very cheap, and especially the foot switches are not good at all. I think this is something IK Multimedia needs to work on. Should this discourage you from buying? Not at all. It doesn't make any difference from a utility perspective. It's just not a product that feels premium from a physical standpoint. If that matters a lot to you, there's your warning. In terms of durability, I haven't seen any signs that the pedal could fail, but I've also not taken it on the road. So you may want to search around a bit and see what touring musicians have to say about that. While in general I feel like TONEX is a great product, I don't feel like it's a mature product yet, and that's most notable in the software design and user interfaces of both the plugin and the pedal. These UIs feel very dated. Starting with the pedal, I'm not a fan of the design language. I don't love how crowded with words and labels the unit is, and I find most tasks confusing. Most features are behind a secondary utility function, which means you have to combine key presses to access things like the compressor, and it can get a bit confusing. Generally speaking, I disliked using the unit for anything other than plugging in, choosing a sound and setting the output volume. Editing sounds on the pedal is a chore and still doesn't feel intuitive after using the pedal for a year. My advice? Avoid using the pedal as an editor and do it on the computer. About the plugin, the interface is not terrible, but it's also not on the same level as Neural DSP and Helix Native. It's a complicated interface, but there's not really any other plugin that competes with TONEX in terms of how many amps you can have and how great it sounds. I think the interface needs to evolve a lot, but it's also a very recent product and a concept that no one else is exploring, so I'm okay with giving IK a few years to improve the interface and make it more intuitive. In terms of design language, I also think IK Multimedia could learn from Neural DSP, as the current design being used in TONEX feels a bit dated and not very pleasing, at least to my taste, but that's a minor inconvenience. All in all, the plugin's great. So in conclusion, TONEX is a great product and a great idea by IK Multimedia. The idea of the pedal being essentially a player for your TONEX sounds is different from what everyone else is doing, and in my opinion works very well. In the future, I hope IK Multimedia comes out with more variations of the physical pedal, and I hope they work more on the plugin interface, which could be much improved. I think TONEX is a great purchase for almost anyone looking for either a plugin to use in final mixes or a pedal to use in live shows. TONEX can hang with the big boys, and I'm convinced that other than the XFX, which I still believe lives in a category of its own, I think TONEX might be able to live up to the same sound quality as the Kemper and the Quad Cortex. But I'd have to test it out against those units to say for sure. But one thing is guaranteed. In its price point, there's nothing that even comes close to the sound quality of TONEX's tone models. And for that reason alone, I think TONEX deserves to be praised. IK Multimedia has made high-end studio tones available to the masses for an affordable price, and definitely took a percentage of Kemper and Neural DSP's market simply by offering something cheaper that offers similar sound quality. I'm currently a very happy TONEX user, and I'm excited to see what IK Multimedia does next. If you're in the market for the TONEX pedal, I don't think there's any reason not to buy unless you already have a modeler. If you have any questions or comments about the TONEX pedal, please leave them below, Also, let me know what your experience with TONEX has been, I'd love to know. Anyway, thanks for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye bye.